It is my honor and pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, our very own Reverend Sally Robbins. Reverend Sally has been a minister for 23 years and has served as a senior minister of 3 churches. She is currently living in Asheville, North Carolina, with the love of her life, her new husband, Bob. Please help me welcome Reverend Sally Robbins.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you, Jeannie. Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be back with my CLF family again. It is a delight to be here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Rev.Sherry, for inviting me back into this wonderful space. I know that you are here on purpose this morning. If I know anything, I know that there is an intentionality with you just showing up today, or whether you're watching this maybe at a later time, that you are going to hear exactly what you need to hear. You're going to feel exactly what you need to feel. You are going to be ready for a shift. Are you ready for a shift? I know I am. So let's dive into it, because I know that our CLFer group is an actual working group. This consciousness business is a full-time business, isn't it? It's not something you just, oh, let me just try that a little bit. No, consciousness means that you are fully on board and that you are actively working on that which is yours to do. So this month is one of the most important subjects that we can cover. Dr. Sherry has chosen forgiveness as our theme for this month, which I absolutely love to talk about, because there's always something for me to be working on this. Would you agree? We all have something that we can say, yes, I still need to be working on that portion. So I'm going to share my screen with you, because I know that you too have something that maybe you're still working on yourself. Maybe this is something that you are doing on your time as well. And so my topic today is called Forgive for Good. And I love it when titles can mean two different things. And that's what's happening here today. Forgive for good. The first meaning that I think of is, you know what? I'm finally done with that. I can finally move on. I've let it go. I've forgiven it for good. And that's a wonderful thing. That's a great place to come to. But the other meaning that I want to bring into today is a little bit more subtle. And it's forgive for good, meaning I'm forgiving for my good and for the world's good. And so when we come to that place, we know that forgiveness is a process, is a spiritual practice, even that we do, that lifts us up to a place. It clears the channel, it makes us open as a pathway, a conduit for good in this world. Forgiveness is such a valuable process that we uncover and that we commit to as spiritual beings. There's lots of definitions out there about forgiveness, but here's one of my favorites. It's by Lily Tomlin. She says forgiveness means giving up all hope for a better past. Isn't that great? Giving up all hope for a better past, because Lord knows I have reiterated so many times in my mind, well, I could have said this and I could have done that and I should have done this and I should have done that. That is wasted energy, my friends. And what I prefer to do is simply say, that was then. I made the very best decision I could at the time, and now I can move on. Because too many times forgiveness is not just forgiving other people in our sphere, but forgiving ourselves, forgiving ourselves for the mistakes that we made. And I'm going to tweak that word a little bit. For the decisions that we made is probably a better way to say that, because we're making the best decisions that we can at that moment that we're making them. Looking back, we've got all the time in the world. Hindsight's 2020. And yet in the moment, we thought we were making a good decision. So forgive for good means that I'm letting myself off the hook too. Sometimes that's even harder than letting someone else off the hook. I speak from personal experience that I am really awful about that inner critic inside me that keeps harping on, well, you should have, if you could have only done better. And I did the best I could. That's the moment I want to come to. And I hear so today about so many people that just are not forgiving anything for anyone. I just saw a video of a flight attendant who had to step in to an altercation that happened. A passenger got upset when somebody put something in the sleeve in the seat behind him. Now that's the information I have. Maybe it was more than that, but either way, they started a fist fight on the plane. Now this is happening more and more and more. People are on edge. They are getting upset for the smallest little reasons. When a forgiving heart is someone that says, I can just let all that go. I can let it all go. You know, Pema Chodron, I was just reading something of hers, and she says, you are the sky. Everything else is just weather. And I love that. You are the sky. You are the grand, magnificent spiritual being that you are. And everything else, the drama, the job, the relationships, all of that is just, it's just the weather passing through. And yet we can get so hung up on these little things. Let me tell you a story about someone who he exhibited one of the best ways of dealing with drama in his life than I've ever heard of. The year was 1914. It was Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison had been working at his factory in New Jersey, like he did every day. He went home for dinner, and right after dinner, an employee rushed into his home and said, oh my gosh, Mr. Edison, the research plant is on fire. Well, his whole cluster of buildings there was doing all kinds of important research on electricity, and they had just made some wonderful discoveries. And so Edison was very calm, and he said, okay, let's go. And he hurried. It was a few miles away. He hurried down to the plant. What he saw when he got there was all the various chemicals and things that were in the plant were highly flammable. And whatever had started the fire, now it was a raging inferno. And flames were shooting up 6 and 7 stories high. They were bright yellow and green from all these chemicals. And it was just an incredible inferno that was in front of him. This was his life's work. And so as he's looking at this, he calmly says to one of his employees, you know what, go get my family. This is a fire the likes of which they will never see again in their lives. What does he mean by that? He was so impressed that this fire was giving up this beautiful show instead of recoiling and going, oh my God, my life's work is in there. He instead decided to allow that whatever was coming through the universe just to wash over him. That was just the weather. So the next day, as he's looking at this, a New York Times reporter comes up to him and says, oh my gosh, Mr. Edison, here's a picture of what it looked like the next day. It was burned to the ground. And Edison said, don't worry. Don't worry. He says, it's all right. We've just gotten rid of a lot of rubbish. Now, he was clear that whatever had burned was supposed to burn. He was clear that whatever discoveries he was making could be reenacted and more. It was simply making room for the better and the good. And I love this article, this fact that I found from The Obstacle is the Way. This is where I read this story. The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And Ryan says, to do great things, we need to be able to endure tragedy and setbacks. And isn't that sometimes where we forgive ourselves the least, is the tragedies and the setbacks that happen in our life? But this is exactly where we get to practice this spiritual practice. He says, we've got to love what we do and all that it entails, good and bad. We have to learn to find joy in every single thing that happens. Now, the thing that I didn't know about this until I read this was that, yes, I read that Edison had a major setback with this. But one of the things that was little known was that that very building that you see there that burned to the ground was supposedly built with fireproofed concrete. That was what they had said when they built it. Oh, Mr. Edison, this will never burn down because it's fireproof concrete. Because of that, Edison and his investors had not covered it fully for damages. It was only covered insurance-wise for about a third of what it was really worth. So they took a huge hit on this. And he could have commiserated and said, oh my gosh, they promised me this wouldn't burn. It did. It's burned to the ground clearly. And yet that wasn't his focus. His focus was, let's keep moving. Let's move on. And he says to the New York Times reporter, I've been through a lot of things like this. It prevents a man from being afflicted with ennui. Now, ennui is a French word for boredom, but in English, we've actually used it from, it really means a feeling of listlessness. And isn't that sometimes we get comfortable in our lives and something like this wakes us up and he says, you know what, this is the perfect thing. This means that I know that I'm on the right track and I'm going to keep going. And within a few weeks, with the very next day, as a matter of fact, here's a picture of his employees going through the rubble. He did not fire or let go a single employee. He kept everybody on board. Within a week, they got back up, and within 3 weeks, they were partially producing again. The factory was producing. And he ended up losing about $1 million in that, which would be about $10 million worth in today's money. But he ended up producing 25 million after that. And so sometimes the dead weight of our lives is what needs to be let go of. And certainly resentment, anger, bitterness, that is a toxic cesspool from which we definitely need to let go of. And if anybody could have been wallowing in misery, Edison could have, but he said, no, that's not what I'm here to do. And so forgiveness of ourselves, forgiveness of even how sometimes we find how challenging life is. Sometimes that's the critical factor. I don't think I can handle this anymore. That life is just too much. Certainly the past year and a half with COVID has been amazingly difficult for many of us. And yet that's where we get to rise up. This is where we get to practice what we preach. This is where we get to know what we know. Because I can babble all day long about what I think I know. And until I get to practice it in my life, when something comes up and should knock me down, and I can say, no, this is not going to, it may knock me down for a little bit, but I'm like one of those bouncy clowns. I bounce right back up. You can punch me in the nose and boom, I'm going to be right back up again, just like that clown. This is my time to show exactly who I'm made of and what processes I integrate into my life so that when drama does show up, it's just the weather. It's just the weather. And it doesn't all, forgiveness doesn't mean letting others off the hook either. I have a lot of people who come to me and say, well, how can I let them just, go on with their life when they've really done me wrong? Oh, that's an excellent question. And it's not about letting someone else off. It's about who we become in the process of the forgiveness process itself. When we learn to forgive, we are rising above holding someone else in chains. Because I was sharing this with someone else the other day. We can't accept anything that we're not willing to give to others. And so if I'm not willing to let someone else out of their prison in my mind of what they've done to me, the he done me wrong song or she done me wrong song, if I don't let them out, then I'm simply imprisoning myself. We are truly one, my friends. We are only one. And what I do to anyone else, I'm only doing to myself. I saw Michael Beckwith speak about this. He writes about it in his book, Spiritual Liberation, also. And I love this, what he has to say about this. He says, no one has the power to cut themselves out of my heart. They don't have that. I don't care how wretched they act, what they say. They can't take themselves out of my heart. And isn't that the real crux of the matter here? When I go to other someone else, blaming them, shaming them, saying that they've done me wrong somehow, I have othered them. They are not a part of me. I am not practicing oneness. And so, how can I keep my heart open, even in the midst of heartbreak and disappointment, and even anger about some things that have happened? That's the juice of life. That's where we get to practice. Can I really keep my heart open, even if I'm so vulnerable, even if there's something that can happen that can really hurt me? I get to practice this again and again and again. It's the spiritual practice of loving someone else when they're not doing loving things towards you, when they are acting unlovable. It's easy for me to love someone when they're loving me. It's a lot more difficult for me to practice loving someone despite what they do. Not because of, but despite what is happening. You and I have been called to this planet at this time because we volunteered and said, yes, I'm man enough, I'm woman enough to show up and be my highest self to the very best of my ability. I may stumble every now and then, but I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep showing up as love, as compassion, as kindness, even when it is not shown back to me, because no one can cut themselves out of my heart. Many times in our relationships, forgiveness comes up again and again, the opportunity for us to forgive. And I love what the book Radical Forgiveness says about that. It says, when we see ourselves as victims, we think only about killing the messenger. We miss the message. And I've worked with people many times who may have had a marriage that did not work, but they missed the message of what they really needed to glean from that relationship. And they end up jumping back into another relationship and creating the exact same scenario. Different person, but the same lesson has to be taught. And so when we lower ourselves into that vibration of victimhood, we deny ourselves the capability of learning that lesson and being open to the gift that came from that relationship, even if it was uncomfortable or even hurtful. You and I believe, are here, and that everything, if I really believe this stuff, if I really am a true religious scientist, and I really believe that everything is for my highest good, every person in my life, every experience in my life is for my highest good, then that means that I have to totally rise up to a whole new place of understanding when I want to other someone else and when I want to play victim. That's just me playing small, and I don't ever want to stay in that place. I can go and reside there for a little bit, but it's incumbent upon me as a spiritual being to say, wait a minute, stop. This is serving no one. I am now here to rise up to a whole new level and understanding of what I'm here to do and be. I read an article by Reverend Lloyd Strom, and this article really changed my idea about how I look at things like the forgiveness process. And the quote that stood out to me was this. He says, "You cannot offend an enlightened being." Wow. You cannot offend an enlightened being. And he went on to say this, that the only way we will ever be able to live in a world where we are not offended, when we are not offended, is to learn how to forgive all those who offend us. Therefore, whenever we are offended, we are being provided with an opportunity to learn how to forgive more readily and more fully. Consequently, the fastest way to become enlightened, and here when I say this, the fastest way to become enlightened is to allow ourselves to be offended by everyone and then consistently forgive them until we are no longer offended by anyone. That's profound. That the more times I am offended, the more practice I get to have of really deepening my understanding that as an enlightened being, everything will pass through me. Nothing will harm me. It just goes right by me. The ego is not involved any longer. And the man who got offended by someone putting something in his seat pocket in his airplane seat, that's ego. And when we're rising up to the level of enlightened spiritual being, when we are showing up as love, as compassion, as God itself, then those things are so minor, it doesn't even ruffle us one bit. This sounds great in theory. And I promise you, if you are ready to deepen this process within yourself, simply say that prayer. I'm ready, Spirit. I'm ready to practice. Whereas any offense or offending behavior that comes my way, I will practice forgiveness. And I promise you, Spirit will show up and provide you those opportunities. And isn't that what we're here for? What else is there? It's not to accumulate stuff. It's to understand at a soul deep level that the only thing we really can do is show up again and again as our highest self available and keep growing that, staying on our growing edge. And Lloyd Strom closes his article by saying, if you can't forgive those who offend you, you have no right to speak of love. When we get to those places, when we understand that we are clear just to show up, and that if we're going to speak about love, then we got to practice it. We've got to be it. It takes it to a whole new level for us. I'm going to show a short clip from Marianne Williamson. And Marianne has done an incredible work with who she is and how she shows up as love. And so I'm going to show this clip to you. And this was actually, she was on Super Soul Sunday with Oprah Winfrey. And she's talking exactly about this. So it's just 4 minutes. So I'm going to share this with you.
You have been a spiritual friend and counselor to me for years, and I can't remember even what the problem was. I was calling you up crying about something or bemoaning a situation, and you said to me, for whoever it was had done something to me, it was a deep betrayal. I can't even remember who or what it was. And you said, you want to change it, pray for them. And I went, I cannot pray for them. You want me to pray for them? Yes.
I say to people in my lectures all the time, okay, here's your homework. Pray for that person's happiness for 30 days. Every morning,
I know.
5 minutes if you can, because that's what alchemy is. If I pray for somebody
who is causing me harm,
right,
or I feel has harmed me.
But if I pray, your greatest power to change the world, the Course in Miracles says, is your power to change your mind about the world.
Yes.
And all minds are joined. There's really no place where you stop and I start. So if I pray for you, if I pray for your happiness, my mind, one of two things will happen. Either you will behave differently or I won't care. The alchemy will occur, and I will be
But in the beginning, it's hard. You know, if somebody has
Yeah.
really harmed you, because I remember when you told me that, I was like, okay, I'm going to pray for them. You can't even bring yourself to, I mean, how do you pray for somebody who you feel has really, really harmed you?
So what? It's easy to sit there with the anger and the toxicity and the bitterness. That's easy. When people say this is hard, what's hard is walking around with this anger. That's even harder.
And blame.
And
You know,
blame.
and one of the things that you say in return to love is that it's so much easier to bless someone than to blame them. So that's what you're
And
talking
not immediately.
And not immediately.
But
That's what I'm
also-
saying. It's hard to do immediately.
But since the universe is self-organizing and self-correcting, if anybody did anything to me that harmed me, if anybody did anything to me that was a transgression or betrayal, the universe is already on it. The universe has a way to make sure that I get whatever in the material world that person took away from me. I call that the principle of divine compensation. But if my heart is closed, then I won't be able to receive the miraculous new possibility that the universe is bringing.
The principle of divine compensation, not the same thing as reciprocity, as what goes out.
No, it's different.
It's different?
It's the divine compensation means if I have an experience of you,
yes,
and I do something where I deflect a miracle, something wonderful that might have happened, and I deflect that miracle. Or if you were to do something that deflected a miracle. The miracle, the possibility, what might have been blocked by me. The possibility might have been blocked by you. But the Course in Miracles says it is held in trust for you by the Holy Spirit until you are ready to receive it. So, as long as I keep my heart open, the universe will just find another vessel. Will find another way. It could be another person, it could be another time, it could be another situation, or it could, yes, but it's there in the universe. Whatever love is yours. And the love that is yours is by definition the love that the universe, as the handwriting of God, intends, because just like the embryo turns into a baby and the bud blossoms, your life is already programmed in the mind of God to its highest creative possibility. Everything fabulous that could happen is already programmed in the ethers of the universe. The blueprint is already there.
So does it matter then what I do?
Yes, because it's like a file in a computer. If my heart's not open, I don't download the possibility on earth as it is in heaven. So it's a file, it's an undeletable file. But if I don't bring it down to the screen, if I stay in bitterness, what I'll get on the screen is bitter. That doesn't mean it's not in the computer. It just means it's not what I pushed in the...
I just got that in the biggest way.
Yeah.
That is really good.
Yeah, that's a great...
That's good. I need to take a break. That's really good. I just got that. It's all there, and you just need to download it. And God's always waiting.
And so Oprah's about to do the ugly cry there, because she got that we are available for every good thing in our lives if we're open to it. And forgiveness is the process that clears the way for us. It could not be more profound and I love how Marianne puts it. It's right there waiting to be downloaded, and it doesn't matter. No one and no thing can come between you and your good. So even when it feels like I've been betrayed, someone has wronged me, someone has denied me something that I really thought that I should have, it's still out there, simply awaiting my availability for it to come into my life. That simply wasn't the proper vessel, that's all. What a shift I can make when I understand that, and that forgiveness clears the pathway for me to open to my good. Because it's already there. It's all there for me, just waiting. I love how Ernest Holmes puts this also. I'm going to share another screen here. Let's see. Yes, I do. So when we are really delving into this, Ernest Holmes talks about this, and he says, everything moves in circles. This is the way of life, and what we refuse to give, we refuse to accept. Nothing is more important than we learn how to forgive both ourselves and others. And so I know with every fiber of my being that if I'm not absolutely attempting to forgive each and every time something happens to me, then I am defaulting back to that victim vibration and mentality, which is serving no one, especially myself. And so I'm going to close with this quote here. Oprah again. True forgiveness is when you can say, thank you for that experience. Now, it may take time for us to get to that place. And I remember talking to a friend. I had been betrayed badly by someone that I deeply trusted and loved in my life. And I was talking with him, and he said, you're going to know when you have really gotten through this process, when you can say to that person, thank you for this experience. And he was so right. And you know what? As soon as I started that process and I got that, excuse me, into my head, I thought, I know I can get through this. Things started moving in my world that I had no idea could happen. And something shifted big time, and something else came into my life that provided me with the same value of what I thought I had given up, and was even greater. It was an even greater blessing than I could have imagined. And I ended up thanking that person because she had provided me with an opportunity to trust that everything was happening for my highest and best. And that is so hard to do sometimes. I hear you. If I could hear anybody say, but how can I do this? Just like Oprah was crying to Marianne. But how can I forgive this? I know that I can, and I know that I can move on. And so I invite you this week, let's move to a place where we practice the idea that forgiveness raises us all, it lifts all boats, and provides us with a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of playing field upon which we as spiritual beings are always trying to ascend. I always want to be on my cutting edge and grow into a higher consciousness again and again and again. And so this week, let's practice this. Tell Spirit that you're available for practice and say, I'm ready, bring it on. And as you work through whatever shows up in your life, know and trust that Spirit's got your back, and that you too can grow to the level of an enlightened being that doesn't get offended by anything or anyone. You will have a freedom that you've never even dreamed of. That's the point of forgiving for good. Your highest good is awaiting you. I'm going to close with a forgiveness prayer that comes from the wonderful work called The Keys to the Kingdom. It's a wonderful class, and I love this prayer, and I'm going to close with this. So I invite you. I know I've just put an awful lot into your consciousness. Just, if you feel comfortable, close your eyes and take a deep breath with me. Take it all in and let out whatever needs to be let go of. And just integrate this prayer as I say these words. I know that God is the ultimate source of my good, and I see God's presence and action in my life daily through the law of circulation. I choose to use the law consciously. I choose to trust in the law. I celebrate the ever-increasing flow of spiritual energy through all of my affairs. I am ready to open my life even wider to accept more of the good things in life. In the past, I may have unfairly judged myself to be undeserving, unlovable, or unworthy of abundance. I may have imagined myself to be powerless or somehow disconnected from the universal flow of good. I now realize that these beliefs simply are not true. I am worthy of God's rich abundance. I forgive myself for all past mistakes and false judgments. I deserve to feel good about life and myself. I am ready to release all judgments that I have placed upon others. I no longer need to hold on to the feelings from the past. I am ready to be free. I'm willing to let go of anything that stands in the way of my greater good. I forgive all people, circumstances, and conditions that may have brought me pain in the past. I am committed to changing my thinking and moving on with my life. As I do this, I trust in the law of circulation to bring me my higher good. The law cannot let me down. The law will not let me down. I am opening up. I am getting out of the way. I am freeing myself from the past. I am forgiving and letting go. And I thank God for the rich abundance that floods every corner, aspect, and area of my life. And so it is.